Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. Ruth is a visiting professor at a large university in Ireland, and Claire is an associate professor at a primarily undergraduate university in Northern California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire, and today we're talking about Ruth's experience with group exams. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was great. I had some lovely swimming experiences again. So I think I told you last time, we'd just been submerging in the cold water. Mm-hmm. And the last couple of times we've gone, we've actually been able to swim a little bit.
Oh, cool.
So, it's so good. And I think I'm beginning to have trust that the initial freak out feeling will pass. And then it's going to be great. So that's been good. And to be fair, we were currently having an Irish spring heat wave. I'm heavily air quoting over here because I was like, wow, it is a heat wave. And then it's 64. So it's really not actually a heat
that
wave.
Hot, really. But
no, not really. But it was definitely, it was just very, the last time we went swimming, there was 20 women in the water and they're all just hanging out chatting. And it's just, I don't even know why it's so magical, but it's very addictive and magical. So
I love that.
I'm all about it.
And that's so interesting. You're saying you're getting used to realize your body's kind of probably okay. We don't need to freak out about this. I did this last time and survived, so it's probably okay to paddle around a bit. That's cool.
Totally. So, and I think it is getting marginally warmer as we go along. So I think that is helping, because there was one day earlier in the swimming where it was definitely colder outside the water than it was in. And that was a chilly day. But I think, yeah, but it's so good. I love it so much.
It sounds awesome.
I'm all about it. But tell me, how was your week?
My week was good. I think I mentioned on here that I'm co-chief scientist on an upcoming research cruise. It's my first time being co-chief scientist. And we just had last week, thank you. Yeah, we had the first meeting with cruise participants. It was a Zoom meeting where I wanted to share some slides with information that we'd had. And I couldn't share my screen on Zoom. And I was just I just thought it was hilarious because somehow I've already become the old PI confused by modern technology. And so I was just I guess I don't have slides for you. Let me just, it was fine. I just told them what was on my slides. But it was just, how did that happen?
I know. Well, to be fair, did you set the meeting?
No, but I was co-host of the meeting. I should have been able. It was something to do with my new computer. I hadn't. I don't know, but yeah.
Dude, the only answer I think is that Zoom changes all the time, because I'm I know how to use Zoom, and then suddenly I don't know how to use Zoom at all, and it's I don't understand why this is a thing 2 years later. But yeah,
it didn't even occur to me that I should practice sharing screen on Zoom, because I've been doing that every day for years, but. That was the time when I couldn't figure it out.
I'm so happy for you that you're becoming that person.
I know. It's super fun.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm looking forward to that bit of life where we could just lean into it and be like, I'm not learning a new thing now, so some junior student has to figure this out.
Yeah. So my student should share my screen for me.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
So, do you have a quote for us today?
I do. I have a silly quote, but it's from a meme, so I don't even know who to attribute it to.
Okay.
But it is, I am cringe, but I am free. And so I think I am cringe for people who are my age and maybe don't get this. I think it means I am a cringeable person. I do cringeable things.
Okay.
But I am free. And I feel like there's certain aspects of my life where I completely embody that as I'm getting older and I don't care anymore. So even going swimming, there is times in my life where I would fully get undressed and redressed into togs, swimming suits, without showing a single inch. And those days I just don't care at all anymore, that kind of thing. And then there's other things, I was writing some personal statement for something and it was physically painful to me to write this thing. And so I kept saying this to myself, I am cringe, but I am free. So I just need to just embrace the embarrassment and embrace the embarrassing things and be liberated in the process. So yeah, that's what I'm shooting for.
accepting and not worrying about them.
Yes.
That's
exactly.
cool.
Whatever the equivalent is of getting undressed without caring, I need to be able to do that professionally, but not. Yeah. Yes. So that's where I'm at with that.
That's neat.
So cool. So I think I found your episode about the self-graded exams revolutionary, and so I'm going to follow up with my version of that. But also, this is something I think that is super helpful, and we're kind of excited about maybe doing is like more detailed descriptions of how to implement certain things.
Totally. I feel like I'm all about the detail. Like, you were talking about, I've already talked about group exams on this podcast, and I was like, I do remember that happening, but I still don't feel like I have enough detail to actually try it out myself if I wanted to. So I totally agree with you. Detail is what I need to to properly figure out something. So I'm really interested to get all the detail about how you do group exams, because I have never done group exams. I don't think I've ever taken a group exam. I just don't understand how it's doable.
Totally. I'm fully. I was absolutely where you were at. And so, would I tell you my evolution of the group exam?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first came to our university, there was a colleague who did group exams in a different kind of setting.
Okay.
And his was super cool. So the students would take an exam in a 2-hour period, and the second hour was a group portion. So they would do it themselves for the first bit, and then the second hour was a group portion. And so I kind of like had that in my head that was cool and interesting. And then we talked about this on here a lot with test corrections and letting students redo exams. And I basically would let people do that out of discomfort. When people are melting down about how bad their exam is, and I'd be like, just why don't you do some corrections and hand them in and see if you can get some points back or whatever. And you know, I don't feel great about it because it was a super random process. Like, who would come and talk to me about their exam, who was upset enough, who made me more uncomfortable, whatever it was. Like, that was who I gave that option to. And I was absolutely horrified. Like, they would hand in stuff worse than the original stuff that they did. And then I tried really clarifying, like, you can use the book. You can come to my office hours. Like, I will help you do these problems. Like, absolutely. Still, like, really bananas stuff handing in. And I think the thing I wasn't recognizing is the person that was going to help is someone who absolutely knew all the material, but for whatever reason had a brain freeze on the day. Do you know what I mean? But for people who didn't know anything and didn't know how to do anything, it wasn't super helpful.
They still didn't when they were doing the test corrections. Okay.
Yeah, and it became like something that was just deeply frustrating and annoying to me because, like, especially the first year I was teaching, I ended up someone like, I literally gave them back the test 3 times, which is absolutely ridiculous on my part. But like, you give it back to them, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, can I do it again? You're like, sure. And hand it in, it was still awful. And so anyway, it was just, yeah. So I started saying to students, I will give you this if you hand me in a perfect test. I will, whatever. But
and
that wasn't...
Okay, no, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Was that, did you give that more broadly, or was that still to the people who made you most uncomfortable?
Still to the people who made me most uncomfortable. So one thing I did do was anyone who got below a certain grade, I would announce in class, you need to come talk to me.
Okay.
And I would write on their test, you need to come talk to me. But, you know, whether they did or didn't wasn't necessarily a thing. So anyway, the whole thing, it just was deeply frustrating and not doing what I wanted it to do, apart from alleviating those 2 seconds of discomfort. But yeah, nothing else. So then I came up with the idea of implementing this colleague's great idea for a group test, but as a revisiting opportunity. And so through like various equity workshops, I, like, this is pathetic, but like I really hadn't considered the idea of a test as being a learning opportunity.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Because we think of it as an assessment.
Totally. So it's just like measurement, like pouring water in a jug. What does the student know at the end? And like, you know, and so this time, like, I was kind of getting the idea that they could learn through the test. Do you know what I mean? So I tried something else for trying to get students to go through, like, review the questions, and it just didn't they weren't taking it seriously, or just whatever it was didn't work. So I did the group test. So what I would do is, I think I've shared on here before, and it's not necessary for this process, but I would have a lab period be the time that I would do an exam. So say our lab period was on a Friday, it was 3 hours, students would do the exam, and then I would grade it over the weekend and hand it back, say, on the Monday in lecture. And then the next time we had a tutorial section, which was 2 hours, I would say, instead of activity today, we're doing a group exam. And so I would give them the same test in terms of content, but like change the numbers of the problems so that nobody is just like, I knew the answer was 5 because I remembered it was 5 or whatever. So I would change the numbers in the problems. People would get into groups. They would know it was coming. And so some students would elect to not come because they were happy with their score.
Oh, interesting.
So that, you know, is something, one thing that really was one of the most heartwarming things was, especially one particular year I had an amazing class, and a whole bunch of people who got like 90-something% came to class because they wanted to help their classmates do the group test. So it was really effective. Okay, so well, maybe I should tell you this bit of information too now, but the grading scheme is that your old score becomes 90% of your grade and your new score becomes 10%.
Interesting. Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So if somebody got 94% originally and they get 100% on the group test, their score is only going to become 94.6%. So it's not really much like worth it for them. Whereas someone who got 50% originally, if they get 100% on their group test, their score now goes up to 55.
Okay.
I really don't actually know why the math works out this way, but that's how it works. So, and we talk about that when I hand the test back. So then some people elect like, oh look, this is only going to raise my grade by 0.3% or whatever. I'm not coming to class. And I tell them, I am only going to grade this if you get 100%.
Oh.
So this is only going to count. I am here, and at the time I actually had an in-class peer support. Peer support person was there. We will do everything to help you get 100%. We're all working together on this. This is happening. So you have to get 100% and make it perfect. And so...
Now, when you say group exams and we're all working together, they're in smaller groups than the whole class, right? Or
perfect.
Is it
so they're in
class?
Groups of 3.
Okay.
So they're in groups of 3, and then I hand out 1 paper per group.
Okay. And so kind of the goal is for them to all get 100% on this second version, but they're revisiting the same concepts. They already know, like if they got a 50, they know they don't understand it, but hopefully they're starting to understand it by working in groups on the exact same stuff. Okay, I think I understand.
Yeah, and so they've had the test back, but they're not allowed to have it out on the desk with them.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So they had a chance to review it the night before and maybe figure out what went wrong, but they can't just like sit and transcribe from someone who got it correct. Do you know what I mean? So if somebody got it right, they still have to articulate to the classmates that they got it right. And so then usually we take it ends up being almost the whole 2 hours, and people finish quickly. Do you know what I mean? But like I give over the whole like tutorial period, but I think you could absolutely do it in an hour. Maybe you could even do a slightly shorter version of the original test or some highlights from it or something.
Pick whichever questions people really had trouble with or something. That'd be cool.
Yeah, totally. And so this for me has been hugely successful, both in students not complaining about their grade because usually like I don't know why it's just so different, and it's making me think of your situation than me just handing them worked solutions. But like when you guys came up with it together and worked through it, there's some investment in developing these solutions to the test.
Okay.
That it's something different where they're like, oh, okay, that's why I got that wrong and I lost 3 points for that. And so my number of, but why did you take off 5 points? That just vanished completely in the process of doing this. So
and then what about, can you assess or do you have an impression on the students? Like, do they feel like they've learned more, or do you think they've learned more now that they've gone through it again, talking with their neighbor about how to do it? Can you tell if they've improved on their knowledge of the content?
Yeah, so I one thing that I noticed when I was doing this, and this was not scientifically done, but on the final, I would often put one problem from each midterm that was a problematic one. And I did notice after doing the group tests, those problems,
Cool.
people did way, way better on. And then just verbally from the students, they were so into it and so energized coming out. They're like, oh no, I get it now. I get it. Like I figured it out. And they're so invested in figuring it out during the period of time that like, because I'm like, it has to be 100% or I'm not going to change your grade, which I mean it just has never come up because then, but they're really like, no, but why is this? And they're like really discussing things and really invested in figuring it out.
I love that you make it clear the expectation here is 100%. That's what you are going for.
Right.
So then they know that's what they're going for. They're not going for the 95, they're going for the 100. Yeah.
Totally. And then I even say to them, this was when it was in person obviously, but please take a photo of the test because now you have a perfect version of this test.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
That's their key right now.
Right, exactly. And so I'm like, now that will be helpful when you're preparing for the final and if you want to review stuff. And so I don't know what it is. It's just like their investment level is so much higher because they're like, you know, fighting for their grade or whatever. And then they really like together communicate and figure it out. So it really works. And then I think it is like, in terms of the whole thing, and I think this is what was like really beautiful in what you were talking about, like if you're thinking of an exam as being like a formative, like you're actually learning from it, that bit is something I was completely missing before, was this key bit. You know, like not like, I guess you could provide them the solution set, but the fact that for them to be invested and like really change, like learn. I just think so many people, if they get a test back and they get problems wrong, are like, oh, well, I got that wrong. But not like, oh, wait, how do you do that then? Or like making sure that they really do it correctly. So I think that was a big gear shift.
Oh, totally. I mean, I remember getting back things and, you know, it would say like 8 out of 10 on this question. And I'd be like, oh, good. So I was pretty good on that question. But I wouldn't be like, but what was the problem?
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. No, totally. And so... yeah, I think that they would come out of it really understanding the material and getting something. And so I think that was really good.
Okay, cool. So this is really cool. I have a couple questions at this point, if I could ask.
Oh, yeah.
So first of all, it sounds like you need to make a new exam each year because there's perfect solution sets going around. Is that true? Or how do you deal with that?
Oh, that's actually a good point. So I think... yeah, like I would always slightly change exams or like have like, say in mechanics, like I would have 3 problems and just like rotate them through.
Okay.
Which ones get used. Yeah. So that's a really good point that like, because there is, but because for some reason the fact that it's not provided by me in my handwriting feels like, I don't know why that feels different, but it kind of feels different. That's a good point.
I mean, if somebody did look at that, they'd have to be pretty confident this was correct. And to be confident, they'd have to know how the problems worked. And so it all works out in the end. Like if you have old exams floating out there and people know how to answer all the problems on them, I mean, that's actually great. So
totally. Yeah. So it's no...
Okay. And then what about, well, first of all, I also really like how you give the individual exam 90% of the points. So it's not like you're raising the grade by going over it again and by making sure that they're committed to exploring the answers and getting 100%, which is excellent for learning, but you're still assessing what they knew when they took the test individually, which isn't, I think that's an important assessment, that you do the individual assessment as well.
And I don't think it would be fair for someone, like the chances of someone getting the same grade as someone who just did well the first time is like non-existent. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And say for the person who got 50 and now they have 55, they're still getting a D.
They still need to change their trajectory, yeah.
Totally. And so it's just, you know, in the game of adding up all the points in the end, it's like a little bit of, you know, and I think, so yeah, I do think it's important to not have it be a complete, like, yeah, because then I think it's important to motivate students to study and learn as much as they can from the beginning, but to somehow, and maybe like your way sounds amazing, but some process that is actually You know, we talked about, or remember we used to do these things, what was it called? Do you know, after the exam,
No.
it was like a worksheet you fill in. It was like a exam reflection exercise.
Oh, I don't remember this. We did
Do you
this?
remember from Science 100? Yeah, it was like something where like they got an exam back in...
Oh, yes. It was a whole assignment where they took an exam from another class. This was like a learning to be a college student kind of class. They took an exam from another class, and then they went through all the feedback. And what'd they do with it? I don't remember.
I don't know, but it was just sort of like, did you know this, or was this, you know, or how did you
what
prepare?
kind of mistake was it? Did you just make a mistake? Did you not know it? Did you misread the question so that you could try to improve your strategy for next time? Like if it was you made a whole bunch of little mistakes, that's a different solution than if the problem was you didn't know how to do a whole category of problems, or if you misread the questions or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like this is like we really need to have that reflection portion in the thing. So I think this was effective for me in getting them to really go back over something. But again, not just totally rewriting history.
Totally.
Do you know what I mean? So
I love that. And, you know, they still have the rest of the class to build on all that content that they hopefully learned. So it's not like they're not getting credit for their new learning and they're going to have the final and all that. So I feel like it's perfectly reasonable to not raise their grade that much while you're still hoping that they're learning a lot more by this group part of the exam.
Right, and I think it's really helpful too. I mean, I haven't actually sat down and like eavesdropped fully on like what's going on, but I do think it's really helpful for them to hear their peers describing how they do a problem.
Cool.
In a way that's like, I don't know. It's just like sometimes I think it gives them a bit more confidence to see someone who didn't fully know necessarily know the answer, but almost like, I don't know, because there was a lot of people I think in physics who were like, I just didn't even know where to start, and to see someone else sort of just like have a go at something is really helpful for them.
Yeah, here's an example of how you could approach a problem when you don't know the whole process, but you've got some ideas you can see. I do think that's really valuable to see how other
totally, because like watching
it.
me solve problems that I set myself and I know how to do is like
right.
Not like it's it looks shows really them how
easy.
To do them totally, but it's not showing the struggle or the
right.
Well, sometimes it shows the struggle, but anyway, but you know what I mean. So I think that process is helpful too.
Okay, so what about, so you've got all these groups in a room, they've got their exam, their new version of the exam, slightly different numbers, they're going through it in groups. You're walking around helping, and maybe your teaching assistant, if you have one, walking around helping. Now, do you ever, like, are you only talking to the group you're talking to, or do you, like, speak loudly and other groups can hear? Do you write things on the board? How much...
That's a really...
How much, how widespread is the discussion, you know?
So I think that's a really good question. So I think I've let it be fairly unstructured. Do you know what I mean? And so how am I going to answer this exactly? So yeah, I definitely, like, if something's coming up enough, I might say to the whole class, blah, 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 this is a thing. But, and
would you tell them the answer, or would you just be like, guys, think about this?
I wouldn't ever tell them the answer. So that's the thing. And they tell them they can come and check their answers.
Okay.
And then I can say, you need to revisit this one or think about this or whatever it is.
Okay.
But like if someone's super stuck, I will totally like tell them in particular just a few little steps along the way so they can kind of, but I don't think I would announce it to the whole room because it's like, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of having a conversation with someone and it's like they are putting in effort. Do you know what I mean?
I like that. So it's like they know if they have the answer right. If they don't have it right, they know they need to keep working on it, find the solution. That's cool. I love that you tell them that.
Yeah.
What about groups? How do you pick the groups that they're in?
See, I mean, and this was actually, I didn't end up in a situation, I haven't had a situation where there was a freeloader. Do you know what I mean? So that was good. Yeah, definitely everyone was quite invested in it and like really working together to thing. And I think at various times I have said like it can't be all one handwriting on the test. Do you know what I mean? So you need to be passing that around, but I don't know about implementing that. The times I've done it, it's been in very like pretty small classes. So I could very much, there was one time where there was like two guys who were very confident and a girl And like they would just not listen to her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just walked by. I was like, she's right, you're wrong. Like, just move on. Like, I can't even listen to this anymore, because like she had gotten it right on the test. She absolutely knew what she was talking about, and they were just not listening to her. So there is times,
Sure.
do you know what I mean, where I would weigh in for sure, because yeah, that's irritating. But I didn't pick them in any, like I didn't assign them randomly or anything. I just let them blob
you
up
let
together.
them, you were like, form groups of 3.
Yeah.
Okay. It does seem like, because of the structure of your exam, your group exam, it doesn't maybe matter too much, you know? It's not like everybody should get 100.
Totally. And they totally can, and I will help them. Because I feel like otherwise then, it's just, that's the thing that gives me anxiety, is like, I don't want somebody's result to just solely depend on what group they got put
Right.
Like, that doesn't seem fair.
That makes sense. And so whichever group they're in, they're all revisiting the test. They're all thinking about it again. They're all going to end up with a correct answer set. They're all sitting there thinking about it. But it seems like kind of the group doesn't matter as much as it might in other cases. So that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And then how do you present it to the students when you're like saying, we're going to do this group exam thing in the activity on Tuesday? How do you sell it to them, or how do you get buy-in, and what do you say?
So yeah, I think it's when, so I hand back the test, and then sometimes like I have like a distribution, and then I'm like, it's really important that, you know, you reflect on this stuff and that we really understand this material before we move on. So to do that, tomorrow we're having the group test. And then I tell them about the grade breakdown, and I do a couple of samples. So like, if you got 50%, this is what you would get at the end. And if you got, you know, 90%, so that they're clear, because I think I can imagine people being mad if they thought, what do you mean? Like, I got 92% and you're telling me that, like, you know, I don't. So I make it really clear about what will happen with the grading, and that it's not going to be a huge change, but it could help, and then it'll just be a beneficial process overall.
That makes sense.
There's some people like who just don't come even if they were someone who would really benefit from it, but that doesn't make me feel uncomfortable.
No.
In the same way, so I'm just like, okay, that's completely a choice you're making. That's fine. You know, and then later on when they're like, but my grade, I'm like, it's such a shame you didn't come to the group test. So like, yeah. Well, this sounds really cool.
I was really nervous about the concept of group exams, and I was worried about, how would you make it fair? How the group seemed really important, and I feel like you've completely managed to deal with all those problems and made it into something where they're revisiting all the stuff that they just worked so hard on, and really hopefully learning it properly, moving on, and I love it.
Yeah, I think having it set up for, like, this is an easy scenario to have it that they will all get 100%.
Which also, it occurs to me, because I was also worried about grading. How are you going to grade the individual? But there is no grading. They get 100%. You check.
Right, and they check before they leave, and you're like, so then you're just like...
So then you just do the math, little Excel formula, done.
Totally.
Love it. That alleviates that concern too.
It was really difficult to do online. I did not enjoy it online. Because I had to get them...
to all the group. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go to all the groups. And then also I had to get them, they all had to individually write it. And I was like, trying to have something like everyone's has to be identical. So you really have to work together. But it just was really hard to enforce. It was a complete, it was not the same experience.
Because I do love the different handwriting requirement. That's kind of cool that everybody must contribute to actually writing on this paper. And you know, you could have a Google Doc or something, but I'm sure you have equations and calculations. And
I know, it's always the equations that mess things up. And I did have earlier on when I did it, especially it was in that class with the Dementors, like that's how I learned to say you have to put your test away, because they were just like took out one person's test who was right, and then one person just transcribed the whole thing, and I was like, this is not what I was going for.
What we were doing.
Yeah, and also that person got like 0.6% more, and you're like, really, was that worth your time? Like, that's just not,
Now, wait, that brings another question. Do they have notes and stuff?
So all they're allowed to have in my test, well, this was pre doing it on Zoom, they're allowed to have an equation sheet.
Okay.
So they were allowed to have an equation sheet.
So
and
it's like
that's
they're
it.
taking an exam.
Yeah.
Like the individual exam.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well.
Yeah. So, and it one thing I was worried about is that it would suddenly skew the grades all over the place, and it really didn't at all. So that was, yeah.
And are these always calculation-based exams, or have you done this with conceptual things too?
I haven't. All of my exams are more calculation-based. So yeah, it would be interesting to see what that would be like for a different type of exam.
And then my last question is, you say you change the numbers but keep the questions pretty much the same. Is that literally just like, oh, instead of a 5, we'll put a 2? Or do you like...
Totally.
So it's very simple to change the exam.
Yes, yeah. So it's just like the car was going at 30 meters per second and now it's going at 28. Or, just so that you're not just like...
You can't just remember, I saw that number before. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, this sounds really cool.
Cool.
And it's inspiring me to try it out.
Well, I'm really, like, I guess the thing I would say is that when I ever go back to, like, I'm in a different situation now where, like, the exam modality and everything is decided elsewhere, but if I ever go back to kind of being the person in charge of the classroom, I will absolutely use your method for, like, upper division.
The self-grading.
And then, and then I think I'll stick with the group test for the lower division.
That makes sense.
So
that makes sense.
That's what I'm... Yeah, because I really loved your thing. I don't know why I have anxiety. Maybe I'm just being really patronizing, but for some reason I have anxiety about it for the lower division classes, but yeah.
Well, one of my interesting takeaways with this was that your group exam thing is actually very similar to the self-grading thing I just explored in a couple episodes ago. So that's really interesting how similar it is, actually.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much, Claire.
Oh, thank you so much, Ruth. This was very illuminating.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.